So one of the things you'll see as a theme for this coming year, we heard Roots and Shoots at this weekend's retreat at Mount Cross. You'll see some of that kind of similar language as we look at the women's retreat coming up. But one of the things that I think is really important as we move through into the fall, and particularly as we move a little further past the thickest part of COVID, is this idea of community, something that we do together. When we talk about the lesson that we have for today, I think the language is kind of stark. It's like, that doesn't sound great, Jesus. If you could dial down this body and blood and flesh language before we get to the altar, that would be great, because I find it really awkward and disturbing. And we have this language that is just profound and tangible. In the Gospel of John, one of the things that is profound is at the very beginning of John. And to tell you how shocking and profound it is, the translators deliberately use different words than are given in the Greek, so that in English, when we read them, it's not quite so shocking, right? So the beginning of John starts like the beginning of Genesis. In the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and all things were created in the Word. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. It's got kind of this poetic arc to it, right? The Word became flesh. But the word has a slightly different connotation. In fact, maybe it has this double play, but it would be more like using the German word Fleisch. This sense of meat, actually, is the word, M-E-A-T. There is just kind of a visceral sense of what's going on. But this idea of God who lives up in the clouds and is kind of abstract, John is making the point that there is a tangible, touchable, hurtable, lovable God that walks among us in Christ. Sometimes that makes us uncomfortable. We talked this weekend about the power of community and the challenges of community. The power of community is that it is people coming together, and as Christians we would say, people coming together as the body of Christ in our baptisms bound together. And we said that some of the challenges of community are the same exact thing, people, right? So sometimes maybe it's the person sitting next to you in the pew that is a challenge for some seasons. Maybe there are seasons where you are the person in the pew that is the challenge. Maybe that's the case. And we go through these ups and downs, and it takes work and effort. It is an uphill walk. It's not a downhill gravity assist kind of deal. It takes effort. One of the things, particularly in the Lutheran tradition, that you would often see, particularly of the Nordic immigrant churches, is you would see sanctuaries whose ceilings and the roof would often be in the shape of a boat that has been turned upside down. This idea of voyage, particularly theologically, voyage over water. As we think about our baptisms, as we move from new life, new birth, to death and to salvation, this idea of traveling over the water, over the horizon. But if we think about that in that fashion, we think of the pews in many ways as perhaps like the place where you might sit to work the oars, right? Our faith then is not the kind of thing where we come in and sit and say, well, somebody else is going to row. I'm just here for the ride, right? That's not the way it works. That's not to say that there aren't seasons where maybe we struggle with our faith, but we understand the blessing of being in community, and maybe our rowing isn't as wholehearted as it might be at other times. But then perhaps there are other seasons where we are the ones really putting our back into it and caring for those who are unable to row as hard in some seasons. When we think of the language that we have in John, this business of communion, I can't help but think that I was stumbling around in the dark this morning at Mount Cross and jumping in the car and getting down here. We've seen the coastal redwoods. You can see lonely ones here in Palo Alto, and they're kind of sad. They don't like being in Palo Alto, but they grudgingly do it because that's where they were planted. But the redwoods, one of the things that strikes me every time we visit, we did a treasure hunt where we broke up into groups and they went around, and I was to be one of the spots where the teams would come by. And over the generations, this place has had a different name, but when I worked at camp, it was the quiet place. It was this small ring of trees. In recent generations, the staff referred to it as the fairy circle. And it's this tight little ring of redwoods. Many of you have seen these. But the thing that strikes me as we talk about the biology of these trees is that most of the trees in the forest grow from these kind of suckers off the roots immediately adjacent. If you've ever seen somebody with a standalone redwood, they often are having to trim these back around the trunk at the ground. But if you think about it, if most of the trees grow in that fashion, is it a different tree? Or is it the same tree, but it's like a franchise or something? I don't know what you would call it, but this idea that this tree now has another tree, and then a forest, a range, right? Is it thousands of individuals? In some ways. Is it one entity? Perhaps in some ways. When we hear about communion and we hear about the body of Christ in that language, we can think of the body that is buried in the tomb, but we think of the body of Christ that is us, right? Are we individuals? Yes. We're not baptized generically. It's not just simply child of God or hey you. We are baptized by name, right? But baptized into a body. We are individuals and part of something larger. When we gather in this space, we come in by the baptismal font. We leave at the end of our lives by the baptismal font. But every Sunday, we gather not just to share a meal, not just to hear the word of God, but we gather together and we share a family meal as the body of Christ. So when you come forward, be mindful of those who are not here that are filling perhaps the empty spaces in our line, those who have gone before us, those who are simply somewhere else perhaps, or maybe those who are yet to come. When we think of the body of Christ, there is no limit of time or space or place. So we celebrate that, even if John's language makes us cringe a little bit, this idea that we are the body of Christ, even as we share the body and blood of Christ. Amen. Please stand as you are able.